The material static operator is generally intended for use with non-animated materials. This does not mean that material static cannot produce any animated effects at all. In fact, it can to a limited extent, which I'll show as I run through the parameters for this operator. Generally though, if you wish your particles to change over time, i.e. animate, material dynamic is a more suitable operator. Let's have a look at the parameters for material static. The first thing to note in this flow here is that I actually have 4 different material static operators actually set up, and I'll be turning on these individually to actually demonstrate certain features of this operator. If we click on the first example, which is called material static, or 1 material UV static, what's actually happening in this material is that we have a bunch of materials in the material editor. We have one called material UV static, one called material UV animated, a multi-sub-object material, which is very simple, it just has colors, and we have one material with an animated set of bitmaps in it. So the first option in the operator is to assign a material, and obviously this is a pretty simple choice. If you have this turned off, it won't actually assign the material that you've picked here to be applied to your objects. This isn't necessarily, this doesn't necessarily mean that the operator doesn't have any effect, because you can still assign material IDs and so forth in the rest of the operator, which can then be used in other respects. So generally though, you want to assign the material that you've picked. You can click on this pick button here and pick a material from the material editor, or you can use the standard option with all of these pick buttons with materials. You can actually just grab the material and drag it onto the operator. If you do instance, obviously you get a live link between those two objects there. If you do copy, then you'll break that link. Now, material static's a very simple material. It's got a bitmap on it, which you can see here, which is called random mix. It's just some random colors. There's the bitmap. And if I scrub the timeline, you can see that nothing happens with it, nothing animates whatsoever. If you look at the material UV animated, it's basically exactly the same material, but in this one I've actually animated the UV mapping here. So you can see that as I scrub through it over time, the values actually change on it. The multi-sub object, there's nothing animated in that, and in this material it's just the bitmap that's actually been animated. So if you look at the diffuse color and go down to time, you can see it's got an animation set up. It's an IFL file. You can see that in this one, which just has the UVs animated, you can see it's not an IFL, it's just a static image, but you can see the V value here is actually animated. Okay, so if we look at the most basic functionality of it, we assign a material, we pick material UV static, and it gets assigned to our particles. If I play the animation, I'm just going to render this animation. Just close down this window. I'm not going to save out these frames, this is just to demonstrate this to you. I've actually turned off anti-aliasing as well, so this renders very, very quickly. So you can get an idea if actually any animation is taking place on the textures. And you can see nothing really is happening there. There's no animation, it's just picking up the material, applying it. And that's the most basic functionality of this operator. I'll just cancel that animation. Now, before we move on, as I mentioned at the beginning of this section, just because this material is this operator is generally used to assign a static material, it doesn't mean that it can't actually take advantage of some animation. As I said, if the parameters of a material are animated, like in this case you've got UV animation, this animation will still show up on a static material. So if I turn off this operator and go on to the next one, where you can see I've got material UV animated applied instead,